everybody, it is time for a January wrap-up. January was a tremendously successful reading month for me. I just got a lot done. Let's check the stats here. I did 11 books in January, and the shortest of which was probably Beowulf. Yeah, Beowulf, which is like 180-ish pages in my edition. Really, really good month. I don't know the exact amount of pages, but I felt great. I'm on a roll. To the moment as I'm recording this, it has carried over well to February so far. This is a mix of audiobooks, ebooks, physical books, so I have some of them here to show you, and some of them I'll just have to tell you about. So if you follow my channel, you probably know, but if you don't, my rating system is not like a star system or anything like that. I just do it based on 5 categories, and they're not the same as star categories because they're about recommending them and how highly I esteem them. So the top is best of all time. Next is universal recommend. Basically, I think anyone should read it and could pick it up and enjoy it. The third one is a long endorsement. That's basically, I think it's good. I enjoyed it, but there are some weaknesses that I understand if people don't like it or at least don't love it. Second is if you like X, that's where I recognize some of the benefits of this book, especially like it's similar to some other stuff that you've read. You will like this book, but I myself didn't really enjoy it. And then 1 star is just don't read. So thankfully I had no, or not star, the final lowest category is don't read or skip it. Thankfully I didn't have any of those this month. I actually had 6 universal recommendations. I had 4 long recommendations and just 1 if you like X. So let's get to those, and let's start from the bottom there, the if you like X. And this is actually my buddy read for January, The Once and Future King by T.H. White. Now this is a classic for sure, classic Arthurian tale based on Le Morte d'Arthur. I didn't know much about this at all when I picked it up, so I'm just going to explain it from the get-go. Some people might know this, but as much as I knew this was an Arthurian tale, I really didn't know much about it. So this single volume is actually a collection of 4 different books by T.H. White. Each of them are about 200 pages. I think if you average them together, they don't follow a like singular, uniform story. Like they all are around Arthur, but they change their perspective a lot. So for instance, the first one is called The Sword and the Stone, and it's actually what the Disney movie that some of you might have been seeing, it's about that. It's Arthur growing up. It's very mystical and whimsical. Arthur is turned by Merlin into many different creatures. It's just very like full of whimsy, and it's like magical forest. Robin Hood shows up. Like it's just this very fun tale, and it was actually my favorite by far. When I read that first book, I got really, really excited. And then the second book is called The Queen of Darkness. Let me see what the exact name is here. Yeah, The Queen of Air and Darkness. And this is where the whole epic takes a darker turn. And this is Arthur establishing the rule of his kingdom through war and the beginning of the Cornwall/Wales storyline of Queen Morgause and her children. She's a witch. She is this very harsh, demeaning, kind of like angry personality. And so it's these opposing forces of Arthur, who's learning about what it means to be king and how he doesn't value war in the same way that the classic sort of Saxon culture did, and he wants to find a way around that. In this book, T.H. White calls it a lot, not that might makes right, but might use it, or right uses might, or something like that. He likes to use that turn of phrase a lot. And so that one, I really liked the Arthurian side of things, because Arthur is learning like anti-war messages and against sort of the class system that's been built up in England. But then the other side, the Morgause side, is just very, very dark and gruesome. The third book is called The Ill-Made Knight, and this is from Sir Lancelot's perspective and his ill-fated affair with Guinevere, the wife of Arthur. And it's like the classic love triangle, not romantic love between all 3 of them, but these 3 characters all care and love each other and are very loyal to all of them, and so there's this very uneasy tension that is made. Lancelot is a very interesting character, but I felt that this book again, sort of like killed the momentum, slowed it down a lot, and the final book is Candle in the Wind. It's sort of like the downfall of Arthur and his kingdom because of the Lancelot affair and bringing in the children of Queen Morgause. So it kind of brings everything together in a tragic end. I'm talking about this a lot because I'm not sure if I'm going to do a whole review on it or not, but it's a very interesting read. But overall, I gave it a if you like X, as I said. That's my second lowest category. I just felt like it wasn't, by the end, it wasn't fun to read. Like the first book, Sword in the Stone, I think is great. That would be a universal recommend. But after that, all the rest are either boring or plotting or weird commentary. Also, T.H. White is very much, I think this was written kind of in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, very much a Englishman of his time. And there's some positive there because the English are really witty writers and sort of have fun turns of phrase. And their voice is very interesting. Obviously, I'm broadly generalizing. But also, there is some weird class stuff and obviously racism in some of the descriptions of things. And overall, I wasn't a huge fan of this, but I was glad I read it because it's such a classic. So I should get moving here. Let's get to the long recommendations. I have 4 of those, as I said. The first of which is this guy, the lowest rated book so far in the Malazan world, Knight of Knives, Novel of the Malazan Empire. This is the first one that I read by E.N.C. Esslemont. This was a mixed bag. There's 2 main perspectives. One I thought was not quite believable and didn't really pay off, and then the other one I thought was really, really good. The long recommendation in the sense of if you have read Malazan before, you're going to love this because there's some cool world building in the sense of story and what happens outside of the main 10 books. But also, it's not the same heights as the Malazan Book of the Fallen for sure. Definitely going to keep reading Esslemont stuff because I really enjoy it. Another long recommendation this month is the second book in the Chronicles of the Black Company. That's the first series in the Black Company by Glenn Cook, Shadows Linger. I liked Shadows Linger a lot more than Black Company, which is the first book. I felt that it was much more... Well, so the first book, if you've seen my review of it, is 7 long short stories that are semi-linked with an overarching plot of the Black Company. Shadows Linger is a much more focused story with purposeful perspectives and much shorter chapters, which in my view was helpful for the way Glenn Cook writes. It gives it a much more snappy pace and much more interesting because there's more of a linear through line. The ending I really liked the beginning. The middle act I thought slowed down a little bit and lost some momentum, and since none of the characters are that endearing, you really have to lean on the momentum a lot, which is why this isn't a universal recommend, but I did like it a lot more than the first one. I still think Black Company is worth reading, again, from a historical perspective and how important, especially he is to someone like Steven Erikson, who I really, really like, or a Joe Abercrombie. Still not one of my favorites because of the lack of really likable characters. Yeah, that's all I'll say on that. I might do a long review. I haven't decided on Shadows Linger, but long recommendation for me. The other 3-star read for me this month, I don't have it because I listened to it on audio, but it is Nemesis Games by James S.A. Corey. This is the 5th book in the Expanse, and it is the lowest rated Expanse book to date. All the other ones, the first 4, I gave universal recommendations to. I loved them, and this 5th one I still really liked. I enjoyed it. It was, as usual, a page turner, and had some huge ramifications for the universe and Earth and how things are going to play out in the Expanse series. And I enjoyed that. However, each of the individual I shouldn't say each. Some of the individual storylines, to me, sort of lost their punch. And I shouldn't say lose their punch, but they just weren't as interesting. In this book, sort of the main core fragments off a little more than in the other books. And I didn't like that as much as having them facing a problem together. Yeah, I won't say more than that. It's the 5th book in the series, obviously, so I don't want to be talking too much detail. As usual, I need to recommend The Expanse to you guys. Probably my favorite science fiction series to date. I like Dune and Dune Messiah, but the overall series of Dune, I don't like as much as The Expanse right now. I just really love it. So I'd highly recommend it. I made a whole video about that. You should check it out. I'll put it in the cards or maybe down in the description. Next, another long endorsement. I'm going to get some flack for this from certain people in my Discord, I know, but Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is a read-along we did on my Discord. Join my Discord. There's always an invite in the description of my videos. Come and talk with me and other people about books. But Persuasion we read together. I wanted to get some Jane Austen under my belt. I've already read Pride and Prejudice, but that was several years ago. And for my year of short classics, I'm going to be reading Mansfield Park in March, so I thought this would be good. Also, Evie, shout out to Evie in my Discord. She also has a YouTube channel. I'll link it in the description below. Huge fan of this book, and in fact, this might be her favorite book or one of the favorites. The main story here is Anne Elliot. She's the main protagonist. She had a love affair, this is in the first chapter described, with a young Navy captain by the name of Wentworth that almost got to marriage, but because they were young and she was persuaded by a close family friend not to get married that early. They are separated. And most of this book is about how they steadily start to come into contact in the overall society. Obviously, it's Jane Austen. And Anne is pursued by several suitors, and she has to be persuaded by which one is the right one. I really enjoyed this, but I thought the beginning, and Evie pointed out, ironically, that I'm saying this as a fan of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but I thought the beginning was a little confusing with all the Mr. and Mrs. and who are people's relatives and who's not, and there's time jumps. So I felt like the first 50 to 60 pages were harder to follow, and then they go on a trip to the sea to a place called Lyme, and once there, if you've read the book, you know, things really start getting going, and I found that much more interesting. However, it just didn't have quite the payoff as a Pride and Prejudice did, as I remember it, but there's some great commentary on the sexism in society at this time, and I think Jane Austen does a great job at that. And some people in the Discord even said the romance is really a side plot as opposed to Anne sort of gaining her own identity. And I agree with that. I really like that. Anne is a great protagonist. So I definitely say you should read it, but I do understand, especially if you don't like Jane Austen, that this is definitely not the one that I would say to start out with. Start with Pride and Prejudice so far, and then expand from there. So that is all of my long endorsements. Now we're just into the Universal Recommends. These are all books that obviously I loved quite a bit. Let's start out with my Year of Short Classics read for January. This was Beowulf. I did a live show with Philip Chase from the YouTube channel Philip Chase. He is a medievalist and knows a lot about Beowulf, even speaks and reads Old English. I highly, highly recommend you to check that out, especially if you read Beowulf with me this January, or if you didn't, just watch it, because it's such a great discussion. And Beowulf, I love epic poetry, I'm learning, and this is no exception. It was delightful. Would highly, highly recommend it. Everyone probably knows the story. This is about a Scandinavian hero who saves Denmark from a monster called Grendel, and then his mother, Grendel's mother, terrorizing them, and then eventually he faces a dragon and loses his life. So it's a kind of a classic hero tale. Very, very good. Some great turns of phrase in this book. Great poetry. Read it. Watch our live show. I don't know what else to say about that. I also continued my read through of the Anne books with the third book in the Anne of Green Gables story, Anne of the Island. As I said in my February TBR video, this is the last book that I read where I knew generally what was going to happen. This is my first read through of the Anne of Green Gables books. So after this, I'm kind of in the dark. This was about Anne going to university and her adventures there, the friends she makes. A highlight for me for sure is Philippa, who is very full of herself, Philippa Gordon, like I am, and felt very close kinship with her, and starting down the road of falling in love. And that I found was very interesting. However, I didn't think that this was, it lacked some of the charm. I didn't lack any charm. Something about it just wasn't quite as engrossing as the first two and as emotionally involved. So that's why this gets a universal recommend instead of an all-time great like the other two, Anne of Green Gables and Anne of Avonlea, but still fantastic, and I loved reading these. I also read 2 Witcher books. I have those on Kindle, not physical books, so that's why I have my Kindle here to show it off. Sword of Destiny and Blood of Elves. Both of them I thought were great. I would say they both deserve to be in the universal recommend, but if there's a spectrum of that category, Sword of Destiny is way far, like almost all-time great, and then Blood of Elves kind of just gets there. I don't want to say too much because, again, these are sequels, but Sword of Destiny really gets into the Ciri side of the story, and the actual way that the plot device of the Sword of Destiny is used in that book, I think is brilliant. Blew my mind. Like, after I finished the book, I just sat and sort of like, soaked in what Sapkowski has done because I thought it was so great. And then Blood of Elves really starts this more overarching storyline. The weakness is really at the end of the book. There is a couple of scenes of like literally people sitting around a map discussing what's going to happen. So that gets a little wearying in some ways, but overall a really, really great book. And then my other two universal recommends are Expanse books. I already talked about Nemesis Games, which is a long endorsement, but all of the other ones I read in January, which is 2 others. So I read 3 total Expanse books. These 2, this is Abaddon's Gate, which is book 3, and then Cibola Burn, which is 4. Both get universal recommendations. Both are fantastic. It's amazing how there's the same feel in all of these books, and yet each one tackles something completely different, whether it's a different characters for sure, different setting, just different set of problems, and it's totally unpredictable, and yet there is a through line and a feel that is consistent. So I've just been completely blown away by the series. Really, really loved it. And that was my January. Again, I'm really proud and happy with this January. Looking forward to February. If you haven't, check out my TBR book there. In the comments below, let me know what you read in January, and especially what you think of any of the books that I've read in January, if you have read them. Love talking about books with you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Check out the Patreon if you want to support me in the channel. As always, first in, last out.